This is Gemara in Gittin, Daf Mem Dalid, and we're holding on Mem Gimel and Beis, approximately 15 lines from the bottom, the two dots, which the Gemara continues to give another example of the din of the Mishnah. The Mishnah taught us if someone sells his Eved either to a guy or to Chutz La'aretz, the halacha is that Eved goes free. So Taner Rabbanan continues the Gemara. Love mina akom. If someone borrowed from an akom, and the Eved, explains Rashi, was the mashkoin, so I borrow money from a guy, I owe him $1,000, and I say, if I don't pay you back, my Eved will be yours. Kiven sha'asa loy akom nimusai, because the guy made the akom according to his, the guy made this according to his nimos, means according to his minhag, therefore yatsa lecherus. Now what exactly does nimusu mean? Says the Gemara, my nimusai. Sam Rav Huna bar Yehuda nashki. You know what this refers to? Says Rav Huna bar Yehuda refers to that he hangs a seal on the slave's neck, and thereby the Eved is identified as being belonging to a guy, and therefore the Eved goes free. Masiv Rav Sheshes, ask Rav Sheshes 1 second. Haris v'achakiros, v'arisei batei avos, ve'akom. In all these cases, sharecroppers and tenant farmers, and the aris of one's father's lands, or ve'akom shem mashkoin sadei Yisrael, a guy that designates his field as a collateral to a yid, afal bijaz nimusai, even though they made the field nimusai, p'tuam min ha'maiser. Says the Gemara, Nashki, you're going to tell me that what does nimusai mean? You just explained it means that you hung a seal on the Ev's neck. So how can you make sada bas nashki? Could a field be a seal hanging on someone's neck? Elam Rav Sheshes has 4 lines to the bottom. Zman. You know, it says Rav Sheshes, you know what nimusai means? It means that he wrote the Zman in the Ishtar. Says the Gemara, before we go to the next Gemara, let's look at the last medium-sized line, as Rashi points out. That his Eved is going to be given over if he doesn't pay by a certain Zman. Asks the Gemara, Kasha Zman Azman. We have a stira. What's the stira that we're seeing over here with regard to an Eved? By writing an end time that you have to pay by and putting the Eved in there, it's considered a mechira, whereas by a sada it's not. Loi kasha, the time did not come yet. El gabi Eved, the matazmane, svichel meimar. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. If the Eved, if the Zman already came and he didn't pay back, then of course it's pasha that the Eved is belonging to the guy. So of course it's yatsa lecherus. So what's the chiddush? So explains the Gemara, you're right. Both must be talking about, both by the Eved and by the Sadeh. The Zman did not come v'lo kasha, ha'legufa ha'leperi. When we're talking about the Eved, we're talking about the Eved himself is the mashkin, and therefore when the Zman comes, the Eved is yatzal cherus because it's owned by the guy. Ha'leperi, but the field is only for the peiros, therefore it will not, and therefore the din is going to be different. V'bayisema, second tower, it says the Gemara, as we turn over to Mem Dalid Amid Aleph, says the Gemara, V'bayisema b'shalava amanas lemashkenoi v'loy mashkenoi. Second way of explaining is that it's true. The halva was made with an intention, with a mindset to create this Eved as the mashkin. However, Lemaisa in actuality didn't end up doing it. And that's going to be the reason, the field as a mashkin didn't end up doing it, and that's why it will not be. So Taner Rabbanan, says the Gemara, let's delve a bit deeper. Gavoi b'chayvoi, oishalachai sikrikon lo yatsa lecheres. The Mishnah said that what? The Mishnah said if you sell your Eved to a guy, it's yatsa lecheres. We just extended that a little bit further, that if the Eved is a mashkin, it's yatzal cheres. So now says the Gemara, kivai b'chayvai, if the guy collected the Eved in payment for a chayv, or shalachai sigrikom, Or if a guy who steals things, extortionist, he just takes things by force, took the Eved, what's the halacha? Lo yatsa l'cheiros. In this case, since it was not given over b'rishos, I don't want you to take my Eved. You just took it on your own. Therefore, the Eved does not go free. Says the Gemara, 1 second, really? If the Eved is collected as for my chay, for my daddy, does not go free? V'remini, I'll ask you a sira 4 lines down, Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Areisha Ansai Beis HaMelech. Says the Raisa, if the king forcibly took Garnoi one's granary, in Bechayva, if you took it as a Chayiv last, you have to give him a Meiser. Bin ban parals. But if he just took it in a way that I incurred a loss, Potter milamaiser. So what do you see from over here? We see from this brisa that in the scenario when something is taken forcefully from a yid to pay for his own debt, it's viewed as if it's sold. Just like if I sell something, I have to take off meiser. So too if the king takes my granary by force. So we see that something being taken by force against my will, but because it's paying my chayv, I owe it. So too over here, as the Gemara, if the guy takes my aved, payment for the chayv that I owe him, the aved should as well be considered like it's sold to him, and therefore the aved should go l'cheirus. Answers the Gemara, Hasam, over there, you know what the difference is? Shiny Asab, to come Shari lay. In the case of the granary, the case of the king taking it, it's different. Why? Because the Yid profited. Why did he make a Mishtar Shari? Why did he turn a profit? The amount that he would have had to give to Meiser, and that's why the Meiser is given to Meiser, but it's not necessarily a raya that when something is taken by force, it's considered as if it's sold to that entity. So Tashema, the Gemara continues. The Gemara continues as a stira damarav. Says Rav, if someone sells an eved to a blackmailer akom, then yes, yatzal cheiros. Says the stira. On one hand, we just said a moment ago that if it's lachosik rikon, lo yatzal cheiros. Over here, if it's to a parhanog, which is a similar type of blackmail matziv, it's yes, yatzal cheiros. Answers the Gemara on the case of Rav, the second case, it's Yatzal Cherus. Why? You could have appeased the guy. He's blackmailing you, meaning you had a choice. And if you didn't do anything, if you let him take your Aved, that means that's why it's Yatzal Cherus. Whereas in the first case, when it's Yat Lacham Sikrik, there's nothing you could do. And therefore it's Lo Yatzal Cherus. Kufa continues the Gemara 10 lines down on Marav. Ask the Gemara, what could he have done? You know what he have done? So Bayi Rav Yirmiyah. So the Gemara continues, and the Gemara says that what did we learn in the Mishnah? We learned if you sell your Evet to a guy, it's Yatzal Cheiros. So ask Rav Yirmiyah, what if I only sold him for 30 days? Tashmat spring right, Amarav. So we think right now that when it's sold to the Parhanug, sold to this blackmail guy, we think it's not forever. It's for a month, it's for a specific amount of time. And we see it's Yatzal Cheiros. So we want to use this as a right to Rav Yirmiyah that when something is done for a specific amount of time, it's yes, Yatzal Cheiros. Answers the Gemara, no raya. Hasam biprahanug akom sheina chayzeres. So we try again to bring a raya. So we don't bring a raya. Now Rav Yirmiyah asks the second kasha. So kasha number 1, Rav Yirmiyah is selling you for 30 days. We didn't answer. Kasha number 2. What is the din if you sell an eved, but you retain the right that the eved works for you? The Eved, you sell an Eved, but the Eved is not chayv in mitzvahs. Chutz mishabos v'im tayvim ma'u. Leger toishav, the Yisrael mummer ma'u, lekuti ma'u. Says the Gemara in all these questions, Pashat miya chada, let's at least answer once. One says, the Bryce, Leger toishav, re'u ka'akum. Kuti Yisrael mummer, amri lo ka'akum, amri Yisrael. It's going to be a machlekes. So that's how we'll answer up that shayla about the Eved being sold to those parties. And we continue with the 2 dots, with which we continue with Shilohs, and this time it's Ravami. Says the Gemara, Ba'imine Ravami, Eved Shepevalatzol Gayasais, and Eved gave himself up to bandits, to robbers. And the master can't get it back. What is the halacha? Can the master take the money from the bandits? Lamaisa, it's his eved. Lamaisa, he has ownership in this guy. And therefore, is he allowed to accept the money? Why? Because by accepting the money, basically, he's selling the eved to these goyim. Is that going to be allowed or not? Says the Gemara, Rav Yirmiyah, Rav Zrika, go out, ayin go check the mechilta, go check the different scriptures, and we'll find a raya. Nafak tak v'ashchach the tanya. This is what he found. What is the status if someone sells a house in Eretz Yisrael to a guy which is forbidden? Dam of asurin. The money is us. Va'akom she'onas beisay shel Yisrael. But what if you didn't sell it to a guy? The guy just took away your house. And the master, the owner, cannot get it back. Then, if you're not going to get back the house anyways, you're allowed to take the cash from the house from the guy, and the koy save, and you write to Malo Bar Koy Shalahem, and you let it write up a deed of sale, you let it bring it to the Goyish courts. Why? Because Lamaisi, you're not going to get it back. So at least at some level, you're getting back from the Goyim. So we want to bring a riot from over here. The same thing in our case. If the Goyim took your Evid, L'chayr, you're allowed to take cash from them because it's Kematzel Miyadam, you're at least getting something from them. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Vidilma honey mili bias. Maybe this whole din is by a house to keep it all sagi label of bias. Loyasi lezavune. Maybe the din is by a bias because since everyone needs a place to live, so we don't have to really be concerned that someone is going to sell the house intentionally to the guy, because then lamaisa, you have nowhere to sleep. Aval avdo, when it comes to your eved, desagiv loyal avdo, you could live without an eved, asl zavune. So therefore, maybe we have to be concerned that if we allow this person to take compensation from the goyim that stole his eved, maybe he'll come to sell it l'chatchila to the goyim. Or says Gemara, or Oiloi. So that is the Shail. So Shalach Lu Rav Ami Minei Ami Bar Nosson, from me, Ami Bar Nosson, Taira Yatza L'chol Yisrael. Evit Shablas Ligasi and Rabbi Yachlas Hilav Dini Sevel Dini Akom Motor Litel Estam of a Kaisa Malabar Koi Shel Akom. Why? Neshu Kematzal Miyadams, we refer to Braisa that Lamaisa, the master, is yes allowed to take money from these bandits that currently took ownership of his Eved. And we continue with the Isser of selling a slave. As we just saw, the whole concern was you might come to sell the slave, which is forbidden, to sell the slave to Goyim. So Amar Rav Yishua ben Levi Amukir Avdoi La'akum. Coinsin, I said, we find him, we can ask him on Me'avadamav till 100 times the value. So says the Gemara, Dafka or Lav Dafka. The fact that we make the person buy back the Eved for even up to 100 times of his value, was that a precise number? Or no? Or just a guzma, just means we make him buy it back for a lot of money. So Tashema proves the Gemara, Dam Reish Lakish, Amaycher Be'ema Gasalakum. We find him until 10 times the value. So seemingly, you only have to pay up to 10 times. So the Meya B'dama must have been a gozma. Says more 1 minute, an exaggeration. V'delma shiny Eved. No, maybe selling an Eved to Goyim are worse, because every day the Eved is owned by a guy. He's losing out of mitzvahs. So maybe it is Dafka, maybe it's in reality, you would have to buy it back for even 100 times the value, so it could be owned by a yid, and therefore be chayiv mitzvahs. Of course, an Eved is chayiv mitzvahs like a woman. V'gedi Amri, another territory from Ben Levi, Amaycher Avdei La'akum, Kaitz the says Sarah B'dama of Dafka or like Dafka. Is that case Dafka or not from the Brisa 10 times? Tashema Dam Reish Lakish. Amaycher Ben Magasa La'akum, Kaitz the says Meya B'damel. Says Gemara, no right. Shani Eved L'Adar Lei, the shiny Eved D'Lo Yehadar Lei. Can't bring a raya. Why? Because even after you buy back the Eved does not go back to you. Why does Eved not go back to you? Because as we saw yesterday, what happens is that master has to free him. So maybe that's the reason why by the Eved you have to pay less. So like to say, Tefei, Chad. so then he should be only have to get a kanas one more time. Why is it that much more? 100 times. Ela oven milsad leishchicha, milsad leishchicha, leigazir bei rabbanan. Says the Gemara, to sell an evet to an akum is something which is uncommon, and therefore they don't give such a kanas. And therefore, it must be that the brisa was indeed a guzma. Just means you have to pay back more than the value. So continues the Gemara with this kanas that the Chachamim said to one that sells an evet to an akum. Ba'i minei Rav Yirmiyah amei Rav Hasi. Rav Yirmiyah asked Rav Hasi 3 lines from the bottom, Mdel and Alf. Machar avda yumeis. Someone sells his evet to a guy and then he dies. Do we kanas his own children to buy back and free the evet from the guy or not? If you're going to tell me that what happens, and if a kayin who nicked the ear, he cut the ear of a firstborn animal, and then he dies, of his children get a kanas that they have to redeem the firstborn. So maybe that's only a din by bachar of an animal, because an issa daraisa to give a mum to the animal. Over here, what isser is it to sell evidence? It's an isser derabanan. So maybe you wouldn't get the ganas. As we turn over to Memdalim Abeis, Kivain Melachtai b'Mayed. And if you're going to tell me that one who works on Cholam Mayed, and then what happens? Ubeis, Kivain Melachtai. He doesn't actually work. He intends to work on a Cholam Mayed. And then what happens? The person is nifter before he actually is able to actualize his work. He doesn't actually go through with his plan and work. So kivei malachtai b'mayed umeis like antu b'nai achrav. We do not kanas his children in such a scenario. Mishum lo yavid isura. Maybe that reason is because in such a scenario the person l'maisa didn't end up working in cholamai. Hachamai. What is the din by us? L'ditu kansi rabbanan. And he's not around. So a fundamental shayla in a case where someone sells his evet to a guy, in which we're discussing today, which is aser, and not only is it aser, there's a kanas, you have to buy back that evet and free him. We're unsure at the moment. We're trying to figure out whether the estate, whether his children have to redeem that evet or not. So Amar Lei, so Rav Asi responds to Rav Yirmiyah Tinitu, 5 lines down, Memdalim and Beis, I'll bring you right from a Mishnah. Sadish and Iskatsu B'Shvius, a field was cleared of thorns in Shemitah, Tizra L'Maitzai Shvius. The halacha is, you're allowed to plant it after Shemitah. Netaiva, if the field was fertilized, or Nedaira, or he made a pen in the field for the animal to fertilize it, then you're not allowed to plant it after Shvius. What is the reason? Naktina nativa umeis. Naktina, we have a lach l'moshe misinai. He tiva umeis. What is that lach? If you fertilize the field and he dies, Binoi zarai. His son is allowed to plant the field after Shemitah, even though we just said that if the man himself fertilized the field, he himself cannot plant it, but if he is nifter, then his son could plant it. So Alma, what do we see? So explains the Gemara, we have a beautiful raya that in scenarios of kanas to Rabbanan that someone performed an isser, the kanas is only for him, but not for his children. And Amar Abaye agrees and Abaye rules similarly. Naktinan, we have a Malach Moshe Misinai. Timei Tahira Shal Chaveira, if someone makes his friend Tarayim Tamei, which therefore he has to compensate him for it. But then Umeis, like Kansi Rabbanan B'nai Achrav Mai Taima, because in all these cases it's Hazik Sheino Nikar, Lo Ishmei Hazik. Says the Gemara, 1 second, V'kanas Rabbanani. It's a Hazik, it's a damage that's not recognizable. And the Kanas is in the Rabbanan. So L'dei Kansi Rabbanan L'brei L'kansi Rabbanan. In the case of Hazik Sheino Nikar, they only Kanas him, but not his children. So we have 2 different rayas, 2 different naktinons, 2 different halach l'moshe misinais. One is from the case of fertilizing a field. One is from the case of one is metam in the terrors of his friend, that we would not transfer over the kanas to the child, and therefore if someone sells his evet to Gayim, his child would not have the obligation to free that evet. And we continue, Ayla Chutzlar is 20 lines down, in which the Mishnah said that if someone sells his Eved, L'Chutzlar, he sells the Eved outside of Eretz Yisrael, the lacha is, he has to free that Eved. So Tana Rabbanan says the Gemara, Sheni. He needs to get shechra from the person who bought the Eved, the second master. Rashbag Omer, Pamim Yatza, Pamim Lo Yatza. Sometimes the yes goes free and sometimes not. Ketzad, Amar Ploni Avdi Machartia LePloni Antoichi. If someone says my Eved is sold to so and so, the Antoichi Lo Yatza, then the lach is the Eved does not go free. La Antoichi Shebe Antochia. If someone says I'm selling my Eved to the Antoichi that lives in Antochia, then Yatza, then the yes does go free. So it comes along Rashbag and he differentiates whether you said at the time of the sale that you're selling it to this god, to this person, or whether you specified a person that lives outside of Eretz Yisrael. Ask the Gemara 1 second, but Vatani learned in the Braisa, Bichartua Lantochia, Yatza. We learned that if he sells it to the Antochian, person who lives in Antochia, that if it goes to free, La Antochia Ashari Belod, then Lo Yatza. Lod is a place in Eretz Yisrael. So if this guy who's from Antochia, which is a place outside of Eretz Yisrael, lives in Eretz Yisrael, then the Eved doesn't go free if he purchases it. But if the guy lives outside of Eretz Yisrael, the Eved goes free. Why does the Eved go free? Because it's being purchased outside of Eretz Yisrael. So why did you, Rashbag, just say that the only time the Eved goes free is if he says explicitly, I'm selling it to an Antochian that lives in Antochia? Explains the Gemara, Loi, Kasha, Ha Dislei Beis of Eretz Yisrael, Ha Dislei Ushpiza Eretz Yisrael. The difference between the two cases are, the first case of the Braisa of Rashbag is when the person owned a house in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, if you sell it to a person, even though his native residence, the place he comes from, is Antochia, but Lamaisi also owns a house in Eretz Yisrael. So says Rashbag, in that case, if you sell the Eved straight, he does not go free unless you said, I'm selling it to you who lives in New York, who lives in Antochia. The second case in the Braisa is where the guy is only in a hotel in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, as soon as he buys it, it's as if you sold your Eved outside Eretz Yisrael, and therefore the Eved will go free. By Rav Yirmiyah, the Gemara brings down a related case, about 12 lines from the white lines. Ben Bavel Shasisa Eretz Yisrael. A person from Bavel that marries a woman in Eretz Yisrael, Vechnisa Loi, and she brings into the marriage to him Avad Mushvachis, V'daitoi Lachsar. And his intention now is he married her and he's going to go back home to Bavel. Mahu, what is the halacha? Is the fact that the woman married this man who's from Bavel and going to go back to Bavel is a similar scenario of selling your Eved to someone outside of Eretz Yisrael and therefore the Avadim will go free, or not? Says the Gemara, Tibay Leman Damar Hadinima, Tibay Leman Damar Hadinimai. And explains the Gemara. Tibay Leman Damar Hadinima, that what? That what's the halach that the dowry, the netunya is considered like her own property. So we have a shayla. Do we say it's like her own and therefore the avodim are considered as if they're still in Eretz Yisrael? To the husband now, therefore it's considered like his, and therefore it's considered like selling the Eved outside of Eretz Yisrael. And we have a shayla according to Mandamar that it's considered that it's his. And therefore it's like outside Eretz Yisrael, therefore that will go free. The husband only owns these avadim for the pay rise, not for the gov. Says the Gemara Teku. We have to wait for Eliyahu Navi for this one. We conclude today's shir 4 lines from the white lines. Amar Rav Avua, Shani Li Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan taught me the following din. Eved sheyatzer acharaboy l'Surya, an Eved that leaves Eretz Yisrael on his own and follows his master to Syria. Umachrei sham rabbi, and his master sells him there in Syria. Yatza lecheres, the Eved goes free. Asks the Gemara 1 second about Tiani Rav Chia ibed as zechusai. But Rav Chia thought that since the Eved on his own left Eretz Yisrael, therefore he loses his chas. Therefore, if he subsequently sold, he does not go free. Answers the Gemara, Loi Kasha. Kanshi das Rabbi Lachsar, Kanshi das Rabbi Lachsar. If the master, Rav Yochanan was talking about a case where the master has das to return to Eretz Yisrael, and therefore That's the reason why the Eved does not lose his chos. Whereas Rav Chia's case is kan she'ein das Rabbi Lachzar, and therefore the Eved loses his chos. If the Eved on his own follows the master, and he knows the master is not coming back, therefore the Eved is going to go free. Ask the Gemara of Tanya, Yoitze Eved Achar Rabbi Lisuriya. But the Brisa said that an Eved has to leave Yoitze after his master Lisuriya. Says Mar Yoitze, really? Loisagi deloy nafik. Is it not enough for the slave to leave Atanan? Ve'ina kol moitziin. But we learned in a Brisa, one cannot force any members of his household. Eina kol moitziin. You can't force anyone to leave Eretz Yisrael. So why are you telling me that Eved has to leave? Elam, with this we conclude, Yatza Eved Achar Rabbi L'Surya. Machar Rabbi Sham. This Rabbi Lachzar Kaifin Aisai V'mein Das Rabbi Lachzar Ein Kaifin Aisai. That if the das of the master is to go back, then Kaifin Aisai, the person who buys this Eved, we force him to free the Eved. Whereas, if Ein Das Rabbi Lachzar, then Ein Kaifin Aisai, we don't force him to free the Eved. And we'll pick it up from Rav Anan and Mir Hashem in the next Shir.